The runway buzzed with motion and noise, the kind that made the ground feel alive. Fighter jets shimmered in neat rows, crews clustered beside them with sleeves rolled and smiles sharp, tossing inside jokes like candy. Laughter bounced off hangar walls, full of the kind of confidence that didn't ask for permission. She stepped onto the tarmac without ceremony, her boots worn but clean, her flight suit zipped high and smooth. There was no swagger, no smirk, just a steady walk across the concrete like the noise around her didn't exist. No one greeted her, but eyes followed anyway. Alex walked straight past the newer aircraft engines, purring with vanity toward the far edge of the lot where her plane waited. The P-3 Orion sat apart from the pack, its faded skin dulled by salt and time, forgotten by glamour, but not by function. The crew barely looked up as she passed, pretending not to notice, but she saw them. They had already been laughing about her earlier that morning. Someone had taped a bright orange poncho to the control yoke, zip-tied it tight so it fluttered like a flag. A strip of duct tape read in bold ink, "Bring rain boots." She paused beside it, staring for one long second. The wind tugged at the sleeves of her suit, hot air thick with storm tension. Behind her, someone snorted and said something low. She didn't turn. She reached out, spun the poncho so the message faced the window, then let it hang. Her hands moved through pre-flight with clinical grace, flipping switches, checking dials, eyes steady. She didn't look back at the jets or their pilots. They weren't part of the work. Inside the hangar, crews moved like performers, shoulders thrown back, stories retold before the mission even started. Alex remained in the shadows of that noise. She knew where the real storm was. One of the junior techs called out the lineup, and the fighter teams gave mock salutes like it was all a game. Nobody said her name. Nobody needed to. The poncho hung quietly in the cockpit, too bright, too loud for a woman who never raised her voice. It had been left there to humiliate her. Instead, it waited as witness. Alex sat in the pilot's seat, hands calm on the controls, back straight. She didn't speak. She didn't smile. Her silence settled around her like armor. Outside, the jets roared to life in quick, synchronized motion. A cloud of heat shimmered across the tarmac. One plane took off, tail fin decorated with painted flames, the pilot flashing a peace sign toward the control tower as if the sky belonged to him. Alex adjusted her headset and ran the checklist again. Her crew was still gathering, some hesitant, some distant, none of them loud. The control tower gave clearance in fast-clipped commands. Each call crackled with the thrill of acceleration. Her aircraft's name was last on the list like an afterthought. A gap in the sound. She looked out the windshield as the clouds thickened beyond the airstrip. The storm was coming in fast. She had seen skies like this before, years ago, when names hadn't mattered and every minute counted. The Orion would fly last. It wouldn't be pretty, it wouldn't be fast, but it would go farther than the rest. That was the plan. Not for glory, not for noise, but because someone had to get through. Part 1. The woman. No one noticed. Alex Morgan wasn't the kind of person most people noticed right away. She moved like someone used to doing the job without being asked twice, like she understood time better than attention. Her routine was clean, consistent, and quiet. Her uniform was always sharp, but never new. The cuffs of her flight suit were softened by years of wear, and her boots carried scuffs from real miles, not staged drills. She didn't talk much in the mess hall or linger in the locker room. Most mornings she arrived before the sun hit the hangar roof. She'd check her aircraft alone, clipboard in one hand, weather log in the other. Every bolt mattered, every reading counted. People called her distant, but they never called her late. She didn't join jokes in the break room or offer small talk during briefings. Not because she was cold, but because she understood silence better than noise. She grew up on the southern coast of Louisiana, a town so low it sat level with the tide. The houses were built high on stilts, and the boats were older than the school buses. Her family worked shrimp trawlers 3 generations deep. Alex learned storms before she learned algebra. Her brother Daniel taught her how to spot wind shifts and read the waters rise against the dock posts. He didn't treat her like a kid. He treated her like a crewmate. He kept a weather chart on the bulkhead of their boat, updated it by hand every week. He let her mark the pressure dips and salinity changes when she was 9. She thought it was a game. He treated it like a map to survival. One year late in the season, a storm formed offshore with no name and no warning. It shifted course overnight, caught the coast by surprise. Daniel had gone out that morning swearing he'd be back by lunch. He was careful, never reckless. He left a note on the fridge pointing to a spot on the map where he thought the tide would settle. FEMA hadn't issued an evacuation yet. Boats were still going out. By the time the warning came, it was too late. They found part of his hull 4 days later near the marsh. The official report said the storm wasn't at fault. It was a failure in the forecast. Alex didn't cry in front of anyone. She took the map, folded it into quarters, and hid it under her mattress. She never blamed the sea. She blamed the data. That year changed everything. She started collecting NOAA reports in binders and copied pages from her brother's logbooks. She memorized cloud types and wind layers. At 14, she could explain barometric pressure better than her science teacher. While other kids danced at homecoming, she soldered cables with her uncle on sonar rigs. She worked 2 part-time jobs and applied to a tiny college with a meteorology lab no one had heard of. She didn't care about prestige. She cared about raw data. After graduation, she earned her pilot's license and logged hours on slow planes no one liked flying. Her instructors said she was too quiet but always steady. She didn't brag, didn't post selfies, didn't ask for recognition. Her focus was endurance. She trained on turboprops, learned recon patterns, and studied storm behavior until it became second nature. When she wasn't flying, she was reading mission debriefs or manually recalculating wind drifts just to be sure. Alex applied to the long-range recon program 3 times before they called her back. They needed someone who could handle outdated tech, bad weather, and no fanfare. She said yes and showed up a week early with her bag already packed. In that bag, she kept a shrimp knife her dad gave her, though it hadn't been sharp in years. She also carried a weather log where she still copied notes by hand. Some pages were scanned from Daniel's old charts. She wasn't sentimental. She was specific. Paper didn't crash. Ink didn't glitch. She trusted her pencil more than someone else's algorithm. In briefings, she listened twice and spoke once. If someone cut her off, she let it slide. She never forced her way into conversations or rooms. But when she stepped into a cockpit, she owned it without having to prove anything. Alex wasn't cold. She was just built for the job in ways that others couldn't see. Her discipline was muscle deep. Her loyalty was in every checklist she ran twice, even when no one was watching. She didn't care about flying fast. She cared about flying true, and she didn't need applause to know what she was worth. Part 2. Where swagger fails. The briefing room buzzed with the easy arrogance of people used to winning. Fighter pilots lounged across chairs with jackets half-zipped and boots propped on desk legs. Their laughter rolled through the space like smoke, filling every quiet corner before it could settle. Screens blinked with storm overlays and mission vectors, all in bold colors. The jet's paths sliced clean arcs across the Gulf, red and yellow lines drawn with the kind of confidence that came from high speed and high praise. One wall displayed estimated return times, another listed fuel margins and fail-safes. Alex stepped in. Quietly, notes in her hand. Sleeves rolled just enough to work. Her boots squeaked once on the tile, then went silent. No one turned to look, but they all knew she had arrived. She took a seat in the back second row from the wall and placed her weather log on her lap. The cushion was still damp from someone else's spilled coffee. She didn't move. She didn't wipe it off. She just adjusted her notes and waited. The room smelled like cologne-burnt coffee and sweat. A group near the front made a loud joke about storm chasers. One pilot slapped his buddy on the shoulder, still laughing as the screen lit up with wind band projections. No one mentioned her name, but everyone knew who wasn't part of their joke. The commanding officer walked in and started the session like a race announcer. Quick brief on window timing. High-altitude turbulence expected to increase by Oro 900. Fighter groups launching in 3 waves. The screen zoomed in on storm radius and quadrant overlays. Arcs and checkpoints clicked into place like pieces on a chessboard. The fighter teams leaned forward, eyes gleaming as their runs took center stage. Off to the side, a thin gray curve blinked near the edge of the storm. A recon loop labeled with her tail number and the word optional. It was so faint most wouldn't notice, but she did, and so did everyone who glanced at her before looking away. When her name was called for input, Alex stood slowly and read her line with calm clarity. Request confirmation on cloud layer inversion and low-band interference for drop calibration. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't apologize for knowing what she needed. Someone coughed. A man in a crisp flight suit leaned forward, elbow on the table. His voice wasn't loud, but it landed with precision. Cloud babysitters go last. The room chuckled. Another voice joined in from the right side. "Tell her to bring an umbrella." That earned full laughter. One of them clapped the desk like it was a good punchline. Someone else added snacks, said it'd be a long ride on cruise control. Even the tech crew smiled without meaning to. No one corrected them. Not the officer, not the staff. The briefing moved on like nothing happened. Alex sat down again without a word. She didn't fidget, didn't scan the room for allies. Her fingers just adjusted the corner of her chart and stayed still. Across the aisle, Dana crossed her arms. Jalen stared at his tablet but didn't type. Mark tapped a pencil against his knee sharp and fast, then slower. Maya didn't look up. The screen kept shifting to jet positions, fast climbs, sharp angles, the kind of flying that got camera reels and bass applause. Her path didn't show up again. It didn't need to. She watched the screen the way she always did, absorbing angles, noting shifts in plan without saying much. Her job wasn't to impress. It was to get through the storm and bring back what mattered. Mark's eyes flicked toward her once, just for a second. Dana didn't speak, but her fingers curled tighter on her arm. Maya bit her lip, staring at the floor. They weren't defending her, not yet. But something had shifted. As the briefing ended, the room erupted into a dozen small groups planning gear loads and prep timing. No one invited her in. No one asked for her input. She gathered her notes slowly and stood. Her walk to the exit was as steady as her voice. Not rushed, not dragging, just deliberate. Behind her, the laughter started again, but it was thinner now. A little forced. Like the punchline had already landed, and they weren't sure if they had gone too far. Alex didn't look back. She didn't need to. The storm would decide who was worth listening to, and she planned to be the one who brought the proof. Part 3, Into the Storm. No applause, just duty sub. Part 3.1. The takeoff. Nobody watched. The engines hummed low as the P-3 Orion rolled toward the end of the runway. The sun pressed through heavy clouds, turning the concrete a dull silver. Jets had already launched slicing vapor into the sky with fanfare and radio chatter. No one watched the Orion taxi. Ground crews moved around it like it wasn't even part of the day's mission. Inside the cockpit, Alex kept her eyes on the dial's hands, steady on the controls. Maya sat beside her, flipping through Doppler reads, though her fingers hovered more than moved. Jalen monitored altitude settings with one foot tapping against the frame. Dana and Nolan ran power checks in the back, their conversation clipped and low. The tower gave clearance. Alex responded with only her call sign and target altitude. No pleasantries. No need. As the aircraft lifted its weight, eased into the wind without strain. The propellers held rhythm, old but unshaken. She adjusted the throttle by feel, not by guesswork. Below them, the base shrank into grids and streaks. Past the coastal bend, the water darkened. The storm was still miles out, but the air had already started to shift. Maya called out their first checkpoint. Jalen confirmed course. Alex didn't reply. She was scanning the secondary radar, checking for drift. Tucked into the panel above her was a hand-drawn arc. It was plotted with pencil smudged along the edge. Not official, but precise. She checked it against the satellite overlay. A match. Slight correction left. She eased the yoke without breaking pace. 15 minutes and static came through the comms. A fighter team reported turbulence beyond expected shear. Tail sensors jumping, requesting reposition. Another voice followed, urgent but masked in bravado. Altimeters fluctuating. Wind pressure too high. Fallback recommended. Alex didn't respond. She adjusted trim and tapped the compass once. The aircraft held true. Mark glanced toward her from his seat behind. He didn't say anything, but his posture changed. Less leaned back, more engaged. Dana flicked a switch on the panel beside her and muttered something about generator draw. Nolan didn't look up. He was checking the cabin seal indicators without being asked. The Orion flew quieter than the jets. It didn't cut the air. It listened to it. Alex preferred it that way. Lightning flared across the edge of Maya's screen. She stiffened. Alex reached to the side, flipped a page in her logbook, and tracked the timing against the Doppler pulses. Jalen called out mild shear at 11,000 feet, within range. She nodded once. The storm mass moved slow but wide. Clouds built in layers, pressing light out of the cabin. Still no vibration in the yoke. Still no tension in her hands. Alex glanced at the analog altimeter and adjusted, heading 3 degrees east. Her flight path bent slightly like a curve caught mid-turn. It matched the drawing above her, the one she had sketched in pencil 3 nights before, the one no one had asked to see. The radio crackled again. Another fighter was returning, too unstable, fuel reserve shifting. Maya bit her lip, eyes locked on the storm wall ahead. Jalen stopped tapping his foot. Dana stared at a diagnostic strip and didn't blink. Alex turned a dial, checked backup pressure. Mark leaned forward in his seat. He wasn't looking out the window anymore. He was looking at her. The aircraft climbed as the first layer of storm mist brushed the fuselage. Wind hit from below a lift and dipped like a heartbeat. Alex kept the course. Nolan braced against a frame but didn't speak. Dana adjusted the load settings and didn't ask why. The crew was quiet. Not from fear, from focus. The second checkpoint passed with only a 1-second delay. Acceptable. Maya reported clear signal on all probes. Jalen made a note on his pad, not his screen. Alex marked it in the logbook with a fine pencil line. 1 pass down, 3 to go. The radio silence now felt heavier. No updates from the jets. No jokes. Just the steady pulse of weather ahead and the hands of a pilot who had been here before. Outside, the clouds thickened. Lightning flickered again, distant but sharp. The Orion didn't flinch, neither did she. Every part of the aircraft moved in sync now. The sound of switches, the shift of weight, the eyes scanning readouts, not for alerts but for understanding. Alex tapped the map again and whispered the next heading to herself. It was close now. The first edge of the eye wall, where the real test would begin. And for the first time since takeoff, no one in the crew looked uncertain. They didn't speak, but their silence had changed. It wasn't doubt anymore. It was attention. Subpart 3.2. The Eye of the Storm. The sky turned darker with every mile as the Orion approached the outer wall of the storm. Light thinned to gray, then to nothing, the clouds ahead closing in like curtains pulled tight. The first jolt came low and hard, shaking the floor beneath their boots. Maya flinched and steadied her console. Jalen cursed under his breath and started recalculating readings by hand. Dana rerouted backup power without needing to be told. Alex leaned slightly into the yoke, not forcing it, just guiding. The aircraft responded with a low groan as if bracing itself. Outside, lightning cracked sideways across the port side, flashing white against the wing. Rain hit in sheets, slapping the fuselage in fast, uneven bursts. The pressure gauge dipped, held, then dipped again. The turbulence wasn't random. It moved like a rhythm, like a pattern only she could feel. Mark sat back, pale, jaw clenched. He reached for a bag and missed it by seconds. No one laughed. No one looked away. Alex flipped off one of the autopilot systems and checked the heading manually. Her fingers moved without hesitation, adjusting trim, correcting drift. She didn't speak. The radar lit up with red and yellow rings, each one pulsing closer. Maya called out wind speeds that didn't match the model. Jalen dropped his stylus and picked up a pencil instead. Dana shifted power again, brow furrowed, voice tight but even. "We're hot," she said. 2 minutes to reroute or we lose relay. Alex pointed to a quadrant on the distribution chart and tapped it once. "Cut nav backup. Give it all to relay." Dana didn't question. She made the switch. Lightning struck again, this time so close the plane jumped. The lights dimmed, flickered, then held. Nolan checked the stabilizers, eyes wide, but his hands stayed still. Alex adjusted their angle 5 degrees. Maya reported 5 miles to the window. "If we're going, it's now." Alex nodded once. "Go." The drop system clicked into place, sensors unfolding like metal wings. Data streamed in pulses, each reading feeding into their live model. Outside, wind roared across the windows, screaming and constant. The aircraft shook hard, rattling bolts and cables. Dana caught a loose panel mid-fall. Jalen braced against the bulkhead tablet pressed to his chest. Maya's voice cracked but stayed clear. Alex didn't blink. She watched the gauges, listened to the engines. She felt the storm, pushing, testing, trying to spin them off course. Mark looked at her then. Not with doubt, not with fear. Just focus. She guided the aircraft forward, deeper into the worst of it. Each second stretched, every sound magnified. Then it happened. The pressure lifted, the air fell still, the shaking stopped. Sunlight pierced through the clouds above, soft and silver. The aircraft coasted into a space that shouldn't have existed. Below them, the ocean spiraled in a perfect circle, black and steel and motionless. Around them, the clouds curved upward like the walls of a cathedral. The center of the storm stood wide and clear. Inside the cockpit, no one spoke. Not from fear, from reverence. Maya stared at her screen, hands hovering, then slowly lowering to her lap. Jalen let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Dana didn't move. but her eyes tracked every gauge like she was memorizing the moment. Nolan leaned forward and whispered just loud enough to hear, "We're in." Alex adjusted the throttle slightly, just enough to keep them steady. The aircraft floated forward, calm and smooth. Her pencil-marked flight path above the console matched the curve exactly. Mark turned his head, voice low, quiet, with something that felt like awe. No one else made it this far. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. The crew moved with intention now. Not scattered, not hesitant. Jalen logged the readings without pause. Maya double-checked every interval. Dana stabilized generator output with a touch like muscle memory. Alex kept them inside the loop, inch by inch. Her fingers never hesitated. Her posture never shifted. They passed through the center like a needle threading silk. The pod data was clean. No drops, no glitches, just truth. Outside, the wind stayed low. The sky above looked like broken glass kissed by light. The moment held. No one gave her orders. No one checked her plan. They followed her now, not because they were told, because they chose to. Inside the eye of the storm, surrounded by power and silence, Alex flew steady, and for the first time the team flew with her. Part 4. Quiet Hero. Loud Impact. Sub. Part 4.1. The Return. No one expected. The wheels hit the runway with a soft, wet hiss. Rain clung to the aircraft's body in streaks, gliding off the wings as the Orion slowed its descent. The engines pulled back in steady rhythm, no sudden jerks, no panic in the motion. Outside, the tarmac shimmered with puddles and heat rising in waves from the concrete. Other aircraft sat idle in their shelters, half covered in tarp and silence. The crews that launched earlier stood in loose groups under overhangs, dry and waiting. When they saw the Orion rolling in, heads turned. Not fast, not dramatic, just enough to follow its path the same way one watches something they didn't expect to see again. The plane taxied to a slow stop near the far edge of the base. No sirens, no flags, just one old aircraft gliding home. The propellers spun down as if exhaling. Inside, the crew didn't speak right away. Jalen leaned back and stretched, shoulders stiff from tension held too long. Maya sat motionless, console readouts still gripped tight in both hands. Alex powered down the final system without a pause in her cadence. The switches clicked like clockwork. Her fingers didn't shake. Nolan unbuckled and dropped into a side seat, letting his head fall back against the wall. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Mark opened the main hatch and stepped into the mist. The air outside was cooler now, touched with salt and silence. He didn't look around. He just waited. One by one they followed. Dana crossed her arms as she stepped onto the pavement. Maya clutched the core readouts against her chest like they were made of glass. FEMA staff rushed forward. They didn't ask who was in charge. They didn't bother with introductions. One of them pointed to Maya's hands and said they needed the data now. Jalen handed off the logbook without being asked. It was complete. It was clean. It didn't need edits. The analyst flipped through the first few pages, scanned the timestamps, then froze. His voice dropped. "This changes everything." He didn't look up. He didn't need to. In the background, the other pilots stood still. No more jokes, no more laughter, just a quiet watching. Alex stepped down, last boots hitting the pavement with a soft thud. She didn't say a word. She didn't look for anyone's face. The poncho was still zip-tied inside the cockpit. No one reached for it now. No one mentioned it. The control tower stayed silent for almost a full minute before the next call came through. One by one, eyes returned to the Orion. The last plane to leave. The only one to return from the eye. A second FEMA tech approached, laptop open, numbers already updating. The new data streamed live across the network. Evacuation zones adjusted in real time. Someone whispered to a nearby officer, "Only one aircraft gave us the core pass." Another voice asked who flew it. No one answered right away. Alex stood beside her crew, not in front, not behind, just there, present. The acknowledgement didn't come in words. It came in the way people stepped aside, in the way eyes held longer than necessary, not in judgment but in recognition. The air felt different now, not because the storm had passed, but because something else had, something quieter, something earned. Sub Part 4.2, Recognition without applause. The mission room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines. Screens lined the walls, some blinking with static, others alive with new data streams. A few techs leaned in their eyes, scanning code and wind vectors without speaking. The biggest screen refreshed slowly, colors shifting across the map like breath settling after panic. Storm bands curved along the coastline, red and orange shrinking back. At the top of the display, a label appeared in crisp white text, revised projection, based on Orion 2 data. Below that line, a name, not a call sign, not a squadron number, just Alex Morgan, Recon Flight Lead. No one clapped, no one made a sound, they just stared. The green line of her flight path arced through the center of the storm, clean and complete. It cut through where others turned back. It looped through the eye and out again, never once breaking signal. Mark stood just inside the doorway. His sleeves were still damp boots tracking water across the tile. He looked at the screen, then at her, then looked down. Jalen leaned against the whiteboard, arms folded. He didn't speak. He had posted the final log to the shared channel without editing a word. Maya had drawn a simple spiral on the board showing the shape of the storm's eye. She traced their entry and exit path in a bold blue line. No one asked her to label it. She did it anyway. Nolan passed behind her, glanced once, then wrote one word beside the arc. No one laughed. No one asked what it meant. They just looked at the board and nodded. Dana stood near the far console, arms crossed, face unreadable. She hadn't said much since they landed. She didn't need to. Alex sat at the table near the center of the room. Her jacket was half-zipped, sleeves damp where the rain had soaked through. Her flight log sat in front of her, closed but not forgotten. The fabric patch tucked into the front page shifted slightly when the AC kicked on. Stay on target, faded thread, no signature. A FEMA coordinator entered, clipboard in hand, and handed her the printed storm revision. It was time-stamped and sealed. Her name was the first line. She folded it and placed it in her jacket pocket. No nod, no smile, just steady hands. The same pilots who had laughed days before stood in the corner, silent now. One of them leaned into his wingman and muttered under his breath, "We owe her." The other didn't answer. He just kept watching the map. In another room, planners updated evacuation grids. Entire zones shifted inland, timing adjusted. Roadblocks moved. No one in the mission room asked for credit. No one demanded recognition, but every person present understood exactly what had happened. Alex didn't remind anyone what they said before. She didn't need to. The map said it for her. One arc, one name, one flight that changed everything. Part 5. Why she flew. Alex didn't talk about the storm that took her brother. Not because she couldn't, because the memory lived in places words couldn't reach. It was in her hands, her choices, the way she looked at clouds. She remembered the sound of gulls that morning. The air smelled like salt and diesel, same as every other day. Daniel had packed the boat before sunrise, left a note taped to the fridge. The map he marked out by hand was still there when they realized he wasn't coming back. The forecast had been off by hours. No one had expected the storm to veer east. Evacuation orders came too late. Radios crackled with confusion. By the time the warnings hit their town, the boat had already crossed the inlet. They found pieces of it days later, half sunk in the marsh. The Coast Guard blamed a system lag. Said the satellite delay wasn't anyone's fault. Alex never blamed the ocean. She blamed the data. Blamed how slowly truth moved when it was buried in bureaucracy. She kept the map, folded it, pressed it between books on a shelf in her room. Later she framed it in wood still stained from the dock. That storm changed her. Not with anger, but with precision. She didn't want to feel better. She wanted to know exactly why it happened. So she studied wind, watched how clouds moved in layers, memorized terms like thermal inversion and dew point collapse before most kids learned to drive. She didn't want to be fast. She wanted to be right, wanted the kind of skill that didn't need to shout. Every job she took after school brought her closer to that focus, repairing sensors, logging barometer shifts, asking the kind of questions that made others uncomfortable. College wasn't about grades. It was about access. She found professors who let her sit in on grad-level data reviews. She asked for raw logs, not summaries. When she learned to fly, it was for one reason. Stay in the air longer. Stay in it until the full picture formed, until the storm stopped hiding. Her first instructor said she was too quiet, too focused, told her she needed to lighten up. She nodded, then logged more flight hours than anyone in her class. She didn't need compliments. She needed clear readouts, needed models that matched reality, because someone else out there might be like Daniel, trusting a system that hadn't caught up. That's why she flew. Not for adrenaline, not for recognition. She flew because data on time could save a life, and delay could cost everything. Her notebook stayed handwritten. Her reference map stayed clipped to her knee even when digital dashboards got sleeker. She didn't care if it looked old. It worked. When others posted photos after missions, she logged humidity drift. When others asked about flight time, she tracked oxygen saturation. Quiet work, exact work. It wasn't about the storm. It was about what came after, what could be prevented. She didn't fly to be first. She flew to finish what the others missed, to make sure one more map was right, one more decision had what it needed. Because she had seen what it looked like when it didn't. She had lived with the silence that followed, and she would never let that silence win again. By morning, the map had changed. Lines that once hugged the coastline now pushed inland, sweeping neighborhoods into new zones. The evacuation plan was updated in full, issued with calm urgency. FEMA published the public summary without ceremony. One aircraft completed a full-eye penetration with uninterrupted core data. The sentence was short, the impact wide. On every screen, a single flight path glowed green against the storm's arc. It looped through the center where no other line dared go. Below it, a name. Alex Morgan, recon lead. There was no press conference, no medal, just adjustments in traffic patterns, updated sirens, shelter reroutes, and in that lives shifted quietly toward safety. News anchors spoke in measured tones, pointing to the path that made the difference. Not all the other flights, just the one that finished the loop. One anchor said it plainly. That pass changed the map. Back at the base, the Orion sat near the edge of the tarmac, still slick with morning mist. Its nose tilted slightly upward like it was still waiting for the next call. Ground crews passed by slower now. Alex stood beside the wing, one hand resting just beneath the engine intake. She didn't pat it. She didn't speak to it. She just stood there a moment longer than usual. Inside the hangar, her crew moved with a calm she hadn't seen before. No chatter, no tension, just the quiet rhythm of people who had come through something together. Jalen hovered near a console scanning the full mission log but didn't make any edits. Maya drew a final arc on the board, then stepped back. Dana watched the room, saying little, watching everything. Nolan checked emergency systems again, even though he knew they were fine. Mark walked in from the hallway, nodding once in her direction. He didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. Alex didn't gather attention. She didn't debrief loudly. She waited. When the FEMA rep approached with the final certified log, she accepted it, folded it once, and tucked it inside her jacket. She walked the length of the aircraft, slowly, boots, leaving faint marks on the drying pavement. Her steps echoed against the metal skin of the plane. She stopped at the tail, then turned back toward the building. Her crew didn't follow. They didn't need to. They stood close, not behind her, but near enough to make it clear. They weren't questioning anymore. As she passed the whiteboard, Maya had circled their route in dark blue. Someone had written one word beneath it. Proof. No one erased it. Alex entered the mission room once more. The screen still displayed updated satellite loops. The evacuation zones still blinked. She didn't sit. She didn't stay. She picked up her logbook from the center table, checked the cover for damage, and slipped it back into her bag. A fray on the spine caught her finger. She pressed it flat with her thumb. Outside, the wind had faded. The storm had moved on, still dangerous, but no longer unknown. Families now had time to leave. Buses now had clearer routes. The plane had done its job. So had she. She touched the fuselage once more, fingertips light, then let her hand fall. She started walking slow but steady toward the edge of the compound. Her boots hit the concrete with soft rhythm. The sun had returned in pieces, breaking through the cloud cover in long streaks. Voices from inside faded as she moved farther. But they weren't loud anymore. They didn't need to be. At the gate, she paused, looked back once. The aircraft stood still. The map still glowed on every screen. Alex adjusted the strap on her shoulder and started forward again. Her voice never needed to rise. Her actions had spoken clearly. Leadership, she had always believed, was not about volume. It was about presence, about being there when it mattered most. And now everyone finally understood.